The Enclosure Acts were essentially what set off the Industrial Revolution. These were a series of parliamentary acts, and through the acts, open fields were closed off to the peasant population, making them unable to farm land. Agricultural land was enclosed, which meant that holdings were consolidated into individually owned or rented fields. It was essentially the immediate consolidation of farmland. It made the poor population move to cities, where they eventually would become the workers of the Industrial Revolution. The agricultural revolution of the 18th century paved the way for the Industrial Revolution in Britain. New farming techniques and improved livestock breeding led to amplified food production. Inventions such as the Jethro Tull machine were revolutionary for the time. It worked with a turning-proof cylinder which planted seeds into the ground. The teeth behind the cylinder covered them with dirt. This method made it so not many seeds were wasted and made the seeds easier to root.
I'm Jethro Tull, and I've got poofy hair.
Another idea was crop rotation. If crops were not being rotated, then the nutrient level in the field would go down with time, making the next crop yield less abundant. Using the crop rotation system, the land would be rested and could also be improved by growing other crops. These ideas allowed a spike in population and increased health. Industry will explode in growth after the Enclosure Act. As previously mentioned, the Enclosure Act led to urbanization because the farmers' land was enclosed off and the farmers were unable to farm their lands, so they had to move to the cities to find jobs. An example of a booming industry was the new textile industry. The new textile industry provided faster production with less error compared to handloom weaving. Workers who were moved out of farmlands worked in these factories and helped them grow. More big factors in why the Industrial Revolution became so large were the railroads and steam engines. Railroads exposed all sectors of society. They shipped raw materials, workers, and goods in a faster way than before. Railways altered time and distance. The trains connected people back then like the internet does for us today. We can easily communicate with people far away from us without worrying about whether or not a message has received. People also didn't need to use animals for transportation anymore because, as previously stated, they could travel via train.
Rip at horsey.
So, do you know how steam engines work? Steam is produced by the boiler in the engine. Then it is sent to a cylinder that contains a piston, where the steam puts pressure until it moves the machinery attached to it. Once the piston has moved in a full cycle, a valve will open and release cooler steam into the air outside of the cylinder. This cycle continues to move the train.
Choo-choo! Choo-choo! Choo-choo!
But why was Great Britain the hub for the revolution? A few things Britain did to become the first industrialized nation was that they built factories and canals, extended agriculture, scientific thought, and manufacturing. They also had plenty of materials, two big ones being coal and iron. Coal was cheaper, making it more cost efficient than other fuels. It was also used to power steam engines. Iron was also used to make the tracks for railroads. Handloom weaving is a method of textile production in which two distinct sets of threads are interlaced to form a fabric of cloth. In Britain, textile factories could produce more textiles faster and cheaper than you could by making them by hand. UK's 1721 law banned printing cotton because imported from other countries. The working conditions for the workers in the Industrial Revolution were not optimal, though. Working conditions in the factories were horrid because of the long hours that were usually 12 to 14 hours a day. They had really low wages. Male workers typically made 15 shillings, while women only made 7 shillings. The mines were no better. Explosions were a common accident in the mine. Needless to say, workers were unhappy and wanted fair treatment. But the Combination Act of 1799 said workers weren't allowed to unionize or ask for better working conditions. The people who were entitled to vote were the people who owned substantial property or were wealthy. They passed the Combination Act because the government didn't want the workers to come together to make a stand about their working conditions. The revolution also brought problems with pollution. The River Thames produced a great stench that were dumping human, animal, and industrial waste. The summer was especially brutal. The waste was baking in the hot sun and producing a vile stench. There was a pressure from the citizens to clean up the river. Parliament chose to stay cleaning the river so it didn't go through another hot season. They also realized that by recoding the government, it wouldn't alleviate the suffering of the people who wouldn't move away from Thames. There were outbreaks of cholera in London, and Parliament wanted to end the plague. They also wanted to eradicate the smell.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sick.
They hired Joseph Bazalgette to create a sewage design to help end the problems London faced due to poor disposal, and it worked. But life in the city also had many more issues. City dwellers had the problem of even more pollution. They burned coal for a number of things, which created smoke that would pollute the air. Waste disposal was also a big issue. Human waste was dumped right into the sewers, which led right into the rivers such as Thames. We can learn from the Parliament passing funding to clean up Thames is that if we don't clean up the earth, it will become very polluted, and all life can be changed in various negative ways. The Industrial Revolution also brought many reforms to the workforce. Workers joined unions so the employers couldn't lay off as many workers or fire them without a good reason. Some positive effects that unions have is that the workers would get more pay, better working conditions, and the workers couldn't get fired unexpectedly. A negative effect about unions is that it was bad for the business owners that workers went on strike. The Health and Morals of Apprentice Act gave apprentices 12-hour workdays and medical treatment. The law was not enforced. The Factory Act, 1819, maximum 12-hour workday and no children under 9 to work. This law was not enforced. The Factory Act, 1833. The Mines Act, 1842. Then the 10-Hour Act, 1847. And the Factory and Workshop Act, 1878, preventing women from working more than 60 hours a week. The Industrial Revolution brought about great change with the way children are viewed in the workforce as well as receiving an education. Robert Owens was able to use his fortune and bought the only 4 cotton mills in New Landmark. The situation was unique and special because he treated the workers well.
I'm Robert Owens and I help children.
He was concerned with the welfare of his workers and made sure they had education, their own houses, and medical help. He also went to great extent for not having children work in his factories, but instead went to school if they were 10 and under. The British government increasingly regulated child labor in factories and instituted a public school system.